All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Over Sharon Show. We have a guest today, but before we get into that, I have a quote that I'm going to read, and then I'm going to turn it over to Sharon to pull a card. Today's quote is from the book of Thomas, the Gospel of Thomas. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. Hello, Sharon. How you doing today?
That's a nice quote. Thanks.
Oh, yeah. It's one of my favorites.
Thanks for the reminder.
I really like that quote because I was watching a Yale, because you could just go watch Yale courses. Like you could just go look them up on YouTube for free. So I was watching a whole theology course. I was led there because they were talking about the book of Thomas, but I ended up watching every one of the classes he did a class on every book. And this was a couple of years ago, and he didn't understand that quote. The guy who was like a theology professor, major, whatever, he's like, this doesn't make any sense. What am I talking? So it really blew my mind because I had an idea what they were talking about. And that's when I really realized, that this isn't for everybody. Not everyone gets it. But anyway, we'll talk about that. So Speaking of not everybody getting it, Sharon, you going to pull a card for us?
Yes, I do. But I still want to comment on that quote.
Oh, yeah, please do.
I feel like if Jesus said something like that, I feel like he said something like that. And I remember feeling like I didn't know what he was talking about back in the day. But now with like new eyes, I think I can get what he's talking about, Okay, so was that Jesus?
I believe so, yeah.
Quoting? Okay. Yeah. I get this card pretty often. The 10 of Pentacles.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great card.
I think it, I remember it being about generosity and giving of the things that you've the things that you have acquired, I guess, and the wealth that you have, and just being generous with it, with, family and friends. And so but we have Ashley today, whom I've never been on a show with, but I've seen you guys on Tarotbull Podcast. So you can tell us a little bit more about yourself in a little bit, but about this card and what you think about this card.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. I tell you, just as a side note, I always tell Brandon, I love the name of the show. I'm like, so fucking clever. I'm sorry. And just to clarify, we can swear. Yes, we're good.
Yeah, trust me, we say things worse than swears on the show.
Just want to make sure. So what I think is interesting is kind of the quote for me ties into the card. I was watching this Don't Judge Me rom-com a couple weeks ago, and
Don't judge me.
And it was they were talking about how, when you're on an airplane, you put your own mask on before you put on someone else's. And someone was like, well, I always thought it'd be so romantic if someone put my mask on for me. Like they wanted me to be saved. The person's like, oh my God, now there they go. And they're like, but it's not someone else's job to save you. Like you have the power in yourself to save yourself. So why are you looking and hoping, fingers crossed? Like there's such an ignorance of that, of like, well, I know I can do this myself, but I want someone else to do it for. It's like such a lazy kind of attitude. And it's like, people don't want to do the work to figure out how to solve their own issues for themselves. And so they look to all these other things. Now, on the flip side of that, going into the card you just pulled, I think there is a point when you get to a point where you're like, I have acquired all of this wealth, be it knowledge or whatever, where you want to share those gifts with others. That's not saving them. That's just providing them with the tools to do the work themselves. Like you can think about like when you want to go on like, hold on one second here.
I'll use this time to give a shout out to Carrie because she was talking about the man bun. So that's why I took a quick shower before we started and I left the man bun in. And but now I got to let the locks flow. But shout out to Carrie. She's one of our number one fans. She's our number one fan. What am I talking about?
All right, I'm sorry. The dogs are going crazy here. It's like if there's a trash truck in a 2-mile radius, it's like their mortal enemy. And I'm not even
take
sure
away the
why.
trash.
But so anyway, like think about if you go on The Price is Right, you could be a homeless person and they're like, we're going to give you a car. But that doesn't solve their problems because they still need to pay taxes on the car, be able to provide fuel for the car. And it's one of those like, but you think like, oh, well, they got all this, so it's great. And it's like, they're missing the point of like, I'm giving that you give a man a fish, feed him for a day, you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime type of thing. So I'm just trying to connect here, both our quote and the card.
Really good points. And we have actually talked about some of the things you mentioned about no one's coming to save you. You save yourself. And funny thing, I just posted something this morning in one of our groups, and I'm going to read it because it's a quote by another quote, but it's totally relevant by Carl Jung. It says, "It is not for nothing that our age cries out for the Redeemer personality, for the one who can emancipate himself from the grip of the collective psychosis and save at least his own soul, who lights a beacon of hope for others, proclaiming that here is at least one man or woman who has succeeded in extricating himself from the fatal identity with the group psyche." It was totally relevant.
That's
well,
really
and what a nice segue into what you guys wanted to talk about today, right? With religion and kind of for me, the conformity that goes along with that in some cases.
Yeah, exactly. Before we get into that, I just want to share something quickly about the card. I feel listening to both you guys talk about it, what it reminded me of is that expression of wisdom. When you think about like the trivium, we talked about that last time with grammar, then logic, and then rhetoric, which is the correct order. A lot of times in this society, we're taught, you see grammar, which is just the information, facts around you. And then you're supposed to use your rhetoric to filter it through. That's what they teach us in school and organized religion. So you got to use this ideology that you've been taught, like a good little boy or girl, to filter these. And if they don't fit, then you throw them out. And then you have your logic that you use to go about your life. Well, in the correct steps, the step I think is more beneficial for people, you put the logic step next. So you take the facts that you have around you in your area, your grammar, then you use your own your own logic, your own inner knowing, what you've learned from others, and then you see for yourself what's true. And then once you see that, then you can use your rhetoric to share it with other people. And this 10 of Pentacles is a great example of that, because, we always talk about woke raping, which is trying to wake people up before they're ready to hear ideas and stuff. So this is more about sharing that information with people who are ready. That's why I think it's like an old man sharing it with the children, with the father. They can represent the neophytes, the people who want to learn about this stuff, who are asking the questions and stuff. So that's really who this show's for too. And that's why we're always oversharing.
And I'm sorry, just to interject here.
No,
can you show the card again? Now, Brandon, you went from the perspective of like the older person sharing that. But if I'm looking at this card, I'm looking at it like all of these individuals are open to getting knowledge from every other living thing. Because like I learned so much from my dog, which I know sounds like crazy, but you know what? There's no judgment. There's just like this openness to experience. And I deal with kids a lot, and it's the same kind of idea. But people look at them like, well, they have no experience, or they haven't been taught or whatever. And they're missing the idea of being able to gain the wisdom and that comes from the like purity of a child, or the purity of an animal, or it looks like that's, and I don't want to be gender stereotyping, but potentially a woman and potentially the only female in the picture. And like, there is a perspective that comes with being a woman versus being a man, right? Because they are two opposite ends of the spectrum. And now I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, but
no, you're not. We're totally okay with that.
Yeah, no.
And there's a dog in the picture too. There's a little dog. So I like your perspective there.
Yeah, well said.
Very valid points made.
You can always learn from, if you look at yourself, if you identify as the person who's the master or the teacher, you're not truly a master or teacher unless you're learning from the person that you're teaching from, or you're teaching to, I mean. You're learning.
And you know how you read sometimes about how, like, and I'm going on with a dog and animal, a child tangent, but how they're so open to, you know, different realms or ways of being. And so they can potentially see things, but they also are really great judges of character, you know, where it's like, this dog does, like, my dog doesn't want to go near someone or go near something. Case in point, that house that I was in North Carolina, like, huge fucking red flag, because like there's something going on there. And so I think that's like often overlooked, where it's like, oh, it's like an imaginary friend, or like, oh, well, they just don't like people. And it's like, well, no, like, again, that's kind of diminishing the gifts that they have.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like you said,
and especially children, because they have just come into this realm, so to speak, you know, and potentially they can probably still remember past lives and things like that, you know, without problem. Right. So, and they still have this ability to see without this, but with, you know, with this and with their whole being, their energy, they can feel and see things that we've lost that, you know, some of us have lost that ability to do.
They haven't been taught to discard those types of things yet.
Exactly. And Brandon, you were going to say something.
Yeah, well, I love what you said. And on top of that, I was just going to say that it's like Ashley was saying before, there's no judgment. So the animal, the child, they're just, see the animal. They knew. They're just looking at the world for what it is. And they're just reporting what they're seeing. And like you said, acting off their own intuition. But speaking of children, we have some questions for Ashley. And the first one is perfect for this, because we were going to ask her, what are some of your earliest moments that you remember involving any kind of religion or, you know, belief system or spirituality or anything like that?
Or maybe she can tell us how she grew up with religion and around her family and her siblings.
Yeah, for sure. You can add that right after.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so I'll kind of jump in here. I'm one of 5 girls. And, you know, can I just say as a side note, I hate when people are like, feel bad for your father. I'm like, I've never wanted to murder someone more in my life than when I hear that. Similar to when I say, like, I'm a twin, they're like, can you feel what she's feeling? I'm like, oh my God, I hate you. But so I'm one of 5 girls, 4th in line. So the 2nd youngest. And growing up, it you know, so it's kind of a weird situation that my mom was a teen mom with my oldest sister, and then separated, divorced her dad, got married again for my 2nd oldest sister, separated, divorced from him, then met my dad, and then my twin sister, myself, and my little sister are all his like biological children. But he raised my 2 oldest sisters like they were his and whatever. So like in my mind, they're like my sisters. But growing up for them was very different than growing up for me. My dad's parents are very kind of, or were like very devout Catholics. And that, like, my grandfather was like an usher in church, and my grandmother they would go every week, 4:00 mass. And so I think kind of when my parents got together, there was like a shift in the way that my mom was thinking, and like we started going to church. And so like for me growing up, I just remembered every week you went to church, and I remember it being so long. But then you have the things that go along with it, right? Then you have like Christmas. So you'd have like the Christmas mass where you would dress up, and you have the nativity. And I remember that was being a big deal. I went to Catholic school, literally my entire like school, quote unquote, life. I went to Catholic preschool, Catholic elementary school. I went to an all-girl Catholic high school. I ended up going to a Catholic university. And then for the post-grad work that I did, it was also Catholic university. And it was not chosen that way. It just kind of ended up being that way in terms of like college and beyond. But my parents thought it was like really important for me to go to a parochial school and have that religious aspect like woven into my quote unquote learning. So it's always been a part of like school for me. So in college, when I had to take theology classes, it wasn't like weird, like for the kids that went to public school, or like, I've never taken this before. I was like, oh, this is like no big deal, because I've already done like scripture study. And by scripture, I mean like approved, accepted scripture study. And so like that was never a big deal. It was never a big deal for me to go to a school where there's like a church on campus where like I could go and do like a confession if I wanted to. I did all the sacraments I could up until this point. So I've done, baptism, communion, reconciliation. I was married in a Catholic church, which that obviously didn't end well for me. But so I've done all the things I can do in terms of sacraments thus far. So that's kind of my upbringing in a nutshell there.
So the thing I wanted to ask you, because hang on, let me switch this back. Okay. When I remember growing up really young, because we were hitting on this last episode, this fear of like the devil or the fear of hell and stuff. And to me, it seemed that I was motivated a lot by fear, although I did like the community aspect of it. And even though I thought church was super boring, I like the after parts and going there and hanging out with like my uncle and stuff like that. So what do you think are some of your earliest, like, what did you think about it when you were a kid? What's the first thoughts that you have that you remember?
Well, think about a traditional Christmas, like a Catholic Christmas, right? The good boys and girls get rewarded, right? And the bad boys and girls get punished. And not that they're looking at it like, well, it's not like the devil's going to come on Christmas, but it's like, no, you're going to get, quote unquote, coal. Which is like, at this day and age, I'd be happy for some free fuel. But anyway, I digress.
Please give me free coal. I can build a fire.
And I remember that, I had a teacher that would always, whenever we'd have to say a prayer every morning in school, in grade school. And she'd always pray for the souls in purgatory. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And it was like those people that weren't saved. And it was always like a big deal. Like, well, I need to make sure that I'm saved, which is like, I need to make sure I get all these sacraments. So like I've been baptized, like I'm not going to be one of those souls in limbo. And then, there's a section of like the Catholic calendar in terms of scripture that talks about like the apocalypse and the second coming and like the final judgment. I remember being fucking terrified of that. And you throw that into me being like coming of age as a teenager, like with the millennium, I was fucking insane scared because like that's, they have this fire and brimstone aspect where then it's like Christmas where it's like, but see, he's coming and he's born to save us. And it's like, yeah, but we're all still going to apparently die and be judged, and I could still be in purgatory. So there was a lot of fear for me growing up around that, for sure.
Yeah. So when do you think, when did you first start to question it? And then after that, like, how did your beliefs change throughout your life?
So like in high school, my sophomore year of high school, you did like a scripture study. The first semester was Old Testament. The second semester was New Testament, but you're reading like the traditionally approved books. I decided to, when I was in college, I was like, I'm going to major in history. I love history. But because I went to a Catholic school, a lot of the history classes overlapped with theology. So it was easy for me to then minor in theology. Not that I was like, I'm going to be some kind of like religious professional, but it was like, oh, it just kind of overlapped anyway. And I took a class and it was called Revelation, the Nightmare of God. And I talk about like a great name for a class though, that would like grab you. But what we did is we actually like learned the very basics of ancient Greek and went back and read the original ancient Greek scripture of Revelation and how that would interpret to like historically the context of the time. And then we went into the different other writings that had never been approved by the church and what were they actually saying. And I remember at that point, and I can tell you that all the people that I was like friends with, like we'd all talk about our classes or whatever, but I was just like, this is so interesting because a lot of the people I was friends with had very similar religious upbringings. Like they would go to church and they went to a Catholic school. And I was like, did you guys ever think about this kind of stuff? And then like the more you dive into it, again, also up and coming in like the internet age, right? Because prior to that, where would you go for that kind of knowledge? I wouldn't even know. But like it's all readily available, so you can go down these like rabbit holes to get more information of like, what about this? And then I think kind of the popularity, and I feel like this is going to sound so poserish, but like the popularity of something like the Da Vinci Code, or like angels and demons that went into like the Illuminati, and then like the idea of what is like, you know, the like does Jesus have children, that kind of idea. And then I read this other book that was talking about the gospel of Mary Magdalene, and so it just kind of snowballed into this idea of like, why are we accepting some things but not others? And then you look at the historical context, and again, as a female, I'm like, fuck that. Like, I'm going to let these old men who basically at one point in time, like, and not saying it's not the case now, but like it was a financial institution. You know, the original concept of church is people gathering with similar beliefs in an area. It had nothing to do with what the similar beliefs could be. Like, we all believe in, you know, this goat head or whatever, but like that would be considered a church. And so I think we have strayed so much from that. And I really kind of got like woke to that, if you will, in college. Sorry for that long-winded answer.
Oh, no, that was really good. Thank you. That's very interesting.
Yeah, no, that was perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for here. So to bring it back, because you mentioned your friends and stuff, were they receptive to this? And what about your family? Did you bring it up? And what about your twin sister?
So I think my sister, because like my twin sister and I went to the same school up and through at the end of college. Then she went to medical school. Obviously, I didn't pursue that as a career path for myself. And I think they were kind of like annoyed listening to me talk about it. And I also think that it's one of those, like, there's a fear sometimes, I think, of knowledge that exists outside of the box that you're living in. And it's like, if I listen to this and I believe an ounce of this to be true, then what other things do I have that I believe right now that are just total shit? Like, it almost like rocks kind of like the security you have. And so I think that that's where a lot of them came from. And I think also at the time, like, you know, I was like, what, 20 something kid. And it's like, what the fuck do you know? Like this 20-year-old kid, 22-year-old kid coming around and saying that. But then it morphed in for me, like the idea of incorporating, you know, how all these other religions have kind of intertwined to create the religions that we have now in the world. And so like, when Brandon and I reconnected, I feel like I found more people that were willing to hear like kind of perspective I have, like including tarot and then like symbolism. And now the people that I'm friends with that know that part of me come to me all, like we have conversations about it all the time.
Yeah. I found that same thing. A lot of people at first don't really care. They just want to stick within the in the framework. So if you stay within that framework and that box, then you could become, you know, like people love you and stuff. But once you start to step outside, they're like, what's going on here?
And I don't want to be ageist at all, but I find that the older people have got, like, in terms of my experience, the older people get, kind of the more enclosed they want to be in that box. They almost want to make it smaller and smaller and smaller. They become like more narrow-minded and less open and receptive to different ideas. And I'm interested in saying like, will that happen to me? Why does that happen to some people? Why does the scope seem to get so much smaller? Like, and the openness to new ideas and things seems to go away. I would think it would be the opposite. Like, as you edge closer to death, you'd be more open-minded to all of these different things outside of, well, who knows? I don't know.
You have that concept of people getting set in their ways, perhaps.
Yes. Oh, for sure. I see that with my own parents, where I'm like, who are you? Like, when did that happen?
Interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to come with fear of death. As people get older.
It could be very well true. Yeah.
Instead of facing the fear, it's easier to leave it to that, you know. That's it. I go to church, it's fine. I'll be fine. I could just focus on my everyday.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tunnel vision.
Yeah, exactly. So Sharon, do you have anything you wanted to ask her before because I have another question I want to ask her, but I just want to make sure nothing else
As
came
a
up.
side note, I wanted to say, I heard you say ageist. You're not an ageist. And I just thought I'd never even really heard. Maybe I have and I didn't notice, but like, when did that word come out? Is that new?
I will tell you. So, as somebody that's worked, I work in informal education, and I have, and so we've had to take like mandatory sexual harassment trainings, but that goes into all different kinds of discrimination. And one of the things that they always bring up is ageism, but they're always talking about how like older people are like, well, we're not going to hire him because how many years can we get, like that kind of mentality. And I've often found it to be, and I brought this up to several HR departments. Like I've always experienced the opposite, that flip of like, well, you're young, you don't know anything. And so like, kind of like, okay, pat on the head, like you be quiet, let adult speaking type of thing, where it's like, well, why am I being discounted? And I'm not going to call that like reverse ageism because that's an oxymoron, but like it's ageism in and of itself because I'm being discriminated against for my age. Where it's like people, for me, in my experience and in the industry I work in, they're looking at like, well, these older people have the wisdom and the knowledge. It's like, no, we just talked about, again, in my perspective, they're closed off and not open to new ideas. And like the idea of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. And you get the same result, but you keep, and that's the mentality they have. And so like, I've always been exposed to ageism in terms of my working environment. But that's so interesting that like other people probably haven't maybe heard that word before.
No,
but it's alive and well.
I feel like people just keep making up words to like discriminate people. Like, okay, racism is an alleged thing because, you know, we're not the quote human race where everyone is, you know, doesn't matter your skin color. But now, oh, a color makes you a different race than this other color of skin. It's like, really? When did that happen? When media started telling you that that's what it was? And that's what I feel like they've done with this word ageism, because I'd never heard it. It's like, it feels like indoctrination. Like, no, you have to, like, it's like this and it's like this. We're going to tell you what it is. We're bucketizing stuff. This is ageism. That's racism. This is genderism, whatever the fuck they want to call it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then people feel like they're doing something good and they feel, you know, they get, it's like virtue signaling. They're like, oh, I'm doing all the correct things and all that stuff.
Exactly.
It's really just an inversion, I think, like Ashley said, because that's happened to me before in jobs. Like I've been the youngest person and then I've also been put in charge. But it's just because now that I'm older, I realize it's just has to do with your capability and how intelligent you are. And stupid people are always going to find a way to make intelligent people feel stupid so then they can control them, because it's the only way they really can get some control, which could happen, you know. But yeah, it's hilarious. I can human resources. I would just lose my mind because like I would say to them like, human resource, do you mean like a slave? Like, is that
yeah. That department is just like, yeah, just the whole concept. Yeah, never mind. I don't even want to talk
energy
about it.
Resources are oil and coal. What's a human resource? A slave?
Vomit.
They're like, Brandon, you can't say that. Like, all right, fair enough. Human resource.
Sorry, I got us way off topic.
No, we're oversharing.
Started spiraling.
This is great. No, it's so true though. We hear it goes back to like what we were saying 2 episodes ago, I believe, with talking. Like, are we supposed to even talk? And It's these spells that people use, these words and spelling.
Oh my God. Do you know that someone shared, I'm sorry, in a group thread that I'm a part of it? I don't remember who it was, but that it was like a meme about like anything you say after I am is considered a spell. Do you guys remember that or no?
Oh, I don't remember that.
It like hit me hard, and like I told other people about it and they were like, fuck are you talking about? I did tell someone because now I'm going off on a tangent, but she called me please. And she's like, do you think that you could do a love spell for me? And I was like, I don't dabble in that kind of stuff. Like, I don't like the idea of that because I don't want anything coming back to me in a negative way. Like any kind that to me, that's like a manipulation of something,
right?
You know, and it's like, whatever will be. And so anyway, I don't want to dabble in it, but I said to her, I was like, well, I was actually just reading this, like, I guess it was a meme, but it was saying like anything you say after I am, you're manifesting. And that's where we get the word like spelling. Do you remember that?
I mean, it's resonating because I've seen so many of those types of things, but that particular one, I'd have to see it to know which one you were talking about. But maybe we'll go find it, or you'll find it. But yeah,
I'll find it, send it back.
Yeah, but it's funny because I've been in, and it might have been something I sent too, because I send stuff like that. But I've sent so many that I don't know which one it was.
She's oversharing.
Yeah, I was totally oversharing all the time.
It's great.
So that whole concept, I've been hearing about that as well recently in some of the things I've been reading and the memes I've been seeing and sending as well. And that whole concept of like doing that, like saying I am and saying kind things to yourself.
Yep.
Because you want to manifest those kind things. There's nothing wrong with saying them.
And look, now I'm going to bring it full circle here. And as a kid growing up, you know, I was taught to pray for those things, right? Like, right. Please give me X, Y, Z, as opposed to like, I am bringing in this to my life. It's like, again, that going back to the quote, you're experiencing, you're not looking for yourself to provide the answers. It's like, well, God and Jesus and the Trinity, they're going to bestow these gifts on me. And it's like, well, the reality is like the gift is already here. It's me.
Yeah.
Like, so I can be my own gift and do these things for myself.
Right. Exactly. And that there's the gravel, as we say, where they screwed it up and told you it was the opposite.
Yeah. And that it's like anything we say, it's like a tool. All these ideas work both ways. You could use them to help yourself, or people can use them to, control you. But again, you're allowing them to control you, but they can allow you to see the world in this way where you are under their control and you're asking for stuff that's already yours. It's already, you know, the kingdom of heaven is within. It's already all yours. That's what they say, allegedly. So to
going off of that, Brandon, I'm sorry. To my Revelation class, one of the things that they talked about was like this quote unquote second coming, and this final battle is actually the battle that happens every day internally, where it's like you are choosing your actions, and therefore there are certain reactions that are going to occur because of the actions you choose. So it's like there's always this internal struggle, you know, a closing door situation, like which way am I going? And so like it's up to you to make those choices. It's not like this, it's not like there's going to be all of a sudden like a stop of things. And it's like, well, let's go through all these decisions you made. And it's like good or bad. Like it's not going to be that. And when I learned that, it took away so much of that fear that I feel like I had of like that final, like the words final judgment. It's like, well, fuck, there's no coming back from that. What if I accidentally get put in the wrong side? You know, it's final. There's nothing I can do about it, you know? And so I think it's like the final judgment was then rephrased as like, it's a final judgment for that decision. You know what I mean? Like I made the decision to get married. I can't go back in time and reverse that. That was the final judgment I made for that certain situation. And it is what it is. And then you live with the consequences of it.
Yeah. You ride the waves. Exactly.
That's amazing that in that like revelation class that was sounding so fearful, you actually found some healing from the fear. Instead of being more fearful, you actually were like, wow, it really, and they're telling you truth. They actually were telling you the truth, that it all boils down to your choices, your free will. You have to choose one way or the other. And I mean, unlike what we were talking about in our last episode, which was about how other Eastern religions remove the judgment, I still feel like there's plenty of judgment still within the Christian perspective. But at least you were able to find some sort of, I suppose, relief from a lot of that fear.
Do you know, I think part of the reason that class was so impactful was because, and again, not to like shit on any specific branch of religion, but it wasn't taught by like a Catholic priest. It was taught by someone that was like in the Protestant kind of, where it's like, they're a minister, but they have a life. It's not like I'm dedicating and marrying the church type of idea, where it's like, no, I'm just somebody that, want to help guide others and, use my perspective and knowledge, but I also want to learn and help foster this idea of community. And so there wasn't like that much of like a lecture-y feel of it, of like a holier than thou. It was like, kind of like, we're all in this together,
Wow, that's interesting. That is different. That is a good perspective. I can see how that would change the tone, but still the title of the class was just a bit much. I mean, I feel like they were in the class, they were going toward this whole concept and idea that I personally now see as it's all within. It's esoteric. It's not a literal meaning of a final judgment, but it's a like you were saying, it's an internal battle in our minds every day. And interestingly enough, the church that I grew up in, they also talked about a battle. It's a battle in your mind. And they talked about that whole, like, I think it's a Native American concept of like, it's the dog you feed. Like you have a black and a white dog, and it's the dog that you feed that like wins out or whatever. So be careful which dog you feed, or something to that effect.
Yep.
So I had those concepts, but still it was weird because there was still judgment and all that stuff. But I still got some of those esoteric concepts in somehow. Thank God.
Yeah, I think it had to do with that you were just ready for it. So that actually blends in perfect with the question I wanted to ask Ashley next, which was, so as you started to change your perspective, and I mean, I'm sure in the moment you didn't realize exactly what was happening, but as you started to look at this differently and lose your fear and stuff, how did your, I guess you could say, faith, or how did your cosmology start to change?
I think it felt like it was kind of opening up this container that I had been like putting myself in, or initially been like planted in, kind of like being taken out of a planter and being put out into like the world to grow my own roots and connect to my own different like islands, or foster my own sense of community. And I think that once I started kind of really diving into it, I was open to a lot more of, I hate reusing the word opportunities, but like more of the different gifts and just kind of the flow of energy from the world to be able to harness that. And I think it sounds so cliche to say like create my own destiny, because I don't think I really am doing that, but with the assistance of like just the natural world, be able to live the life that I think all of us should be living. And I had to tell you, it's really difficult for me at times to have conversations with my family about things like this, because they're still kind of, I feel like, stuck. And see, now I'm giving that judgment, so I don't want to do, but it feels like to me, like they're still stuck in this perspective of what I was talking about before, of like praying for certain things and stuff like that, where they don't realize like they can kind of grab the bull by the horns and create the situations that they want by rephrasing, what they're putting out into the world.
May I ask a question? You were just saying that, but you also said you feel like you're not creating your own destiny. So
right.
Any reason why?
I think that there's multiple destinies. I guess I'm creating the destiny in this one realm, but I was listening to this book by this astrophysicist, and they were saying how it's naive to think that this one timeline is the only timeline. There is infinite, if you want to think about the entire existence, the entire universe as a bathtub, each timeline is a bubble in this huge bubble bath of the universe. And so like, I am not creating destinies for those other Ashleys. And realistically, am I creating this destiny here, or is it predestined? I think there are energy sources at play that help nudge us and provide opportunities for us for different things. I think that they look at kind of this cosmic scale, and at times they want to tip it one way if it's been tipped another way. And I'm just speaking from my own experience. Like, I was very much in a situation in the past like year and a half that I was really unhappy, and I wasn't sure like what to do. And when I got provided like this opportunity of like, hey, we can do this, I was like, huh, that's interesting. Like, how did that come about? And I just have to look at it as like, okay, did I apply for this job to move? Yes, I did. So I did that myself. But I think also like there's energy forces in the world that are like, give her a fucking break. Okay. Like, give her a chance to like get back on the horse here. Like, and maybe it's time to swing the pendulum in the other direction.
Do you have a concept of, I mean, you were talking about a bubble bath and universe and stuff like that. Do you have a concept of like past lives perhaps, or like that you...
Funny you should even say that. So like me, myself, I feel like I had more glimpses of that as a kid, but I think again, it was kind of squashed. But I will tell you, and Brandon can attest to this, like I am obsessed with my fucking dog. And I know people are gonna be like, well, I'm obsessed with my animals, whatever. But I'm like, no, like there is a connection there with her. And I've always felt like this very strong connection. I went to this medium and they told me like, because in a past life, that was your little sister. And so like, that's why the two of you are so connected to each other. It's not like a, normal dog where it's like, there's just that canine personality, like, because she doesn't act like a dog a lot of times. She acts like a human, like the way that she decides to sleep and the way she just decides to act and the things that where it's like, you can see glimpses of it, but to some people like, oh, what a personality. I was always like, why do I feel such a strong connection to her? Like, there's got to be something there. So I 100% believe in that. And I 100% believe that when you meet people from your past lives, there's a connection that you can't explain, but you can feel it if you're open to it. And you're like, this person is not somebody that would ever be in my circle traditionally, but there's some kind of like magnetic pull there. And going off of the science background that I have, if we're saying that energy cannot be created or destroyed, it just changes forms. It makes sense to say that once we quote unquote die, our energy just gets transformed into some other type of energy, maybe into some other realm or plane, because it's not ever going to be gone. You can't ever take the energy that's inside my body and just get rid of it completely.
Right. It's consciousness.
Oh my God. Now people are going to listen to this and be like, what a fucking basket case this person is.
We talk about stuff like this all the time, don't we, Brandon? I feel like we do.
Yeah, we're pretty crazy over here on the Oversharing show.
We talk about all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I like what you said about all that, because it could even support the notion that we've been here before. We've tried, like we're doing it over and over again, and it's kind of like it's a test somehow for free will.
Yeah. We talked about this in the last episode, and we talked about the Bhagavad Gita and how it's, you just keep coming back until you decide that you want to do things, in such a way that is, I guess, harmonious with nature or something to that effect.
Yeah, you're really mastering your craft. If you think about like as above, so below, in this life, the only thing we really know, if you want to master something, me, for example, DJing, I just had it was repetition. I do it over and over again, just put myself in the situation, keep doing it. So this way I encounter all different kinds of situations, and then I'm ready for anything that can happen, because I can lean on past experiences. What have I done before? I built the confidence. I made the right decisions through making all the wrong decisions, and I think if we are here to truly master our souls or our free will, I guess, then what better way to do it than to just do it over and over and over again? Kind of like that movie Groundhog's Day with Bill Murray, just like, you just gotta, every aspect had to be exactly right.
Yeah.
And that helps you helped me anyway, get away from a lot of fear of making mistakes, this time, I guess we're going to just try it this way and see what happens, So yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I think synchronicities are there to kind of guide us.
Yeah.
Throughout the way.
And Sharon, like, I don't know how much you know about like Brandon and my relationship or past history, but like we met, I was this stupid kid right out of college and then didn't talk again for like 10 years. And then just randomly reconnected when he had posted on Facebook that he was getting into tarot. And like, if that's not a synchronicity in terms of our lives intertwining, and he has been such a positive impact in my life through one of like, I think the most challenging parts. And so I have to believe that he was brought back in to be like that beacon of hope for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For sure.
Yeah. My name does mean light beacon, Brandon, allegedly. Let's go.
Does
light
it
beacon.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. For real?
Yeah. When I was younger, I was in this Christian bookstore and they had all these different name cards of what names meant. And that's one I remember. And I've seen it other than that too, other places, but yeah. So it's kind of cool because I'm tall. So, and I'm very bright sometimes. So I'm like a tall light beacon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think all the questions that I had pretty much were answered through this nice discussion that we've had so far. So I think we could kind of talk about what you're onto now, Ashley. I mean, you kind of hinted at some of it, but maybe some of your daily practices or just some of the methods that you use that might be considered non-conventional, especially when you think about like organized religion.
I'm really into like manifestations and mantras and repeating those pretty frequently. I love listening to like different Hertz meditations for different types of like cell healings and things like that. Love the tarot. I've always loved the tarot. I think I got my first tarot deck at 14, but I really have been leaning into, and I've done this like since I've done this, but it's been like since January. But my oracle cards, just because they're more thematic for me and help, provide a little bit more focus. So I pull those, if not daily, like every other day. And to be honest, I feel like something else I've really kind of leaned into, and this is going to sound, I feel like so pretentious, but is being more of like a mentor for people that are just kind of starting out in these different types of subject matters, to provide any kind of insight or help for them in terms of my perspective and my experience and like what I would do in a certain situation. And I don't look at it as like advice, but kind of more of like, oh, well, this is what I do. Like, these are the things, like I told you that my friend that called about the spell situation where I was like, yeah, I wouldn't, me personally wouldn't get into that. Now, that being said, I am part of several covens, but I don't participate in like those because I just don't like inviting that kind of stuff. Because you never know what's going to come in.
I want to say really quickly, I think I want to say this earlier, but I forgot to say that when it comes to magic, into like spells, into manifesting, into getting what you want, there's actually a give and a take. And if you're not aware of that, the parts of you or the parts that could be taken are going to be like bad karma that's coming to you. So if you, for example, and this is something I want to ask you about too, what's an example of like your daily manifestations? But if you have that and you're manifesting something and you're sitting there and you're saying, I want to have a successful business, and you're talking about it. Well, if you're also putting in that hard work and dedication, that's your sacrifice, right? That's where the magic's going to come from. But if you're just sitting here like, oh, I want to put a love spell on this person, I want to make them fall in love with me, that it could happen, but then it's going to end up, it could turn into, or could it turn into a situation when you ask like a genie for 3 wishes, and you get what you ask for, but it's not really what you want.
Exactly.
Well, so to go off of that, look at something like Pet Cemetery, but like, where it's like, I always say that if something ever happened to Gizmo, like my dog, like I would be like, oh, if there was any way of bringing her back, but there's no guarantee that if she came back, it would be this, like, there is a give and a take. And it's like, that thing is like in the terms of Pet Sematary, like they're alive, but it's not that same thing anymore. It's just literally a living like sack that looks like what it was, but it's not the same thing. And that's why when I choose, like when I'm doing any kind of mantras or manifestations, and I always tell like this one particular friend, it's so important, the words that you choose, because me personally, I would not say something like, I want a successful business, because how do you define success? And what does that mean? Like, that means I'm going to have a lot of money, or I'm going to get a lot of attention, or like, so like for me, a manifestation would be something like, I am successful in the topic areas I put my attention on. Something along those, like, where it's like, well, if I'm focused on something, I will reap the rewards of that focus. Even though I did just use the word success, but like an example would be something along those lines, where it's like a little bit more specific of, in terms of even relationships with friends, or, being open to like those situations that present themselves around me. Like the situations, I would only want them to be things that will help me grow as a person, as opposed to something a little bit more superficial. And look, there's nothing wrong with something superficial, but like, I feel like I've been there, done that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, also the way that you phrase it kind of inherently makes you be in the present moment, because you're asking for something, but then you have to pay attention to it too. You're saying, you're actively enunciating the fact that your attention is important, and where you put it is important, which we talked about. Go ahead. Yeah.
I think that's so important, Brandon, because and I'm not, kind of like harping on this one particular friend, but like this one person, they want that immediate gratification of like, well, I said it, why isn't it happening? Yeah. And it's like, but you're so focused on the way you think it's going to present itself that you're missing potentially the way it actually is presenting itself. And sometimes when you put something out there that you're like, show me blah, 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 whatever, you're looking for one representation, but maybe that's not the right thing for you. And so that's why you really need to be very self-aware of like a full 360 view of what's going on, to say like, oh, if this is showing me it this way, it's because of, it's saying like, that wasn't the right thing. Like you wanted me to show you, I'm showing you like that's not right. And so in terms of, for example, this love spell situation, it's like, they're showing you the answers already. It's just not the answer you want. And so then what are you willing to do to get the answer you want, which is what I was talking about, was bringing in this like negativity and kind of this manipulation of like, that's like, look, it fucking sucks if you don't get what you want all the time. But like, like you have to believe that it's setting you up for success in the long term to get like this like peaceful existence and this harmonious existence.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's your own human ignorance to say like, I know best.
Yeah, exactly.
To be like, well, I know best, and this thing is the best thing for me. It's like, if I had said that, like, think of the things that you would say at like 20 years old, where like, this is the best thing for me. And I think we can all look back now and be like, what a fucking idiot. Like, I'm so happy I didn't get those things, because like, what? And think about a kid when they're like, well, I really want this, you look back at it again now as an adult, you're like, wow, like almost like cringe sweats thinking about it.
That's so funny, because I was at the store with a friend last weekend, I think it was, and just hanging out with her and her family, and her little girl was there. Her little girl's like 10. And, I remember being her age and wanting things that were just silly, right? So we're walking through this store, and she brings this little bag. And she wants it. And it was just her birthday recently, and she got some money and stuff. So she was like eager to kind of spend it and stuff. And, she brings this little purse, and her mom looks at it and is kind of like, her mom gets it like, yeah. And she looks at the price. She's like, really? That, and she's like, it's made in China. I mean, like, yeah. Like, you want this? But she wasn't like disparaging her little girl. She was just kind of like, okay, I mean, like, if that's what you want, but yeah, I remember I looked at that, and I remembered being her age and going, yeah, I wanted really stupid things too.
Well, think about when people like little girls or little boy or whoever is like, I want to be a princess. And you think about like the stories that they see or that they've read or they'll watch in movies or whatever. And it's like, which aspect of Disney princesses do you like? The part where they're like physically abused or brainwashed or like isolated, or then the fact that when you become a princess, there's all these obligations to the state where you're not really free to do anything. Like you just want to wear a fucking crown and dance around, but you really have no actual real life. So it's like one of those types. You're not going to say that to a kid though.
You could.
Yeah, maybe. I love Disney bashing, so I'm just happy when it happens.
Right. Oh, that's funny.
Well, guys, I've had so much fun today.
Oh,
I also don't really talk to a lot of adults ever. And so my life is a little bit of an island. So I'm like, yay, I get to like talk and share. And that's why you can't shut me up. So I will.
Oh no, please. That was the point for you to be on our show.
Yeah.
You're over Sharon today.
Yeah, it's called oversharing. So
love it.
We did that on purpose.
I see a question that maybe didn't get, maybe you could provide more insight to. And it was about how you approach this like topic of, how you see things in the world. How do you approach it with other people that you meet, new people that you meet? And has it changed from the time you were talking about earlier, and how people like looked at you funny when you asked questions?
I think, do you know how there's this like idea of like, there's certain things you don't talk about at a dinner party. Like you don't talk about religion and you don't talk about government. It's like, one, who's going to a fucking dinner party anymore? And second, like, why would you not talk about those things? If you're in the presence of people that are like, there can be differences of opinions.
Right.
And that's okay. Just because I believe that, as Brandon just said, he likes to participate in Disney bashing. I am a Disney fanatic and we're still capable of existing. I didn't like sign off this call like, fuck this. Like, no. So I think now, since I've had so many kind of enlightened moments or moments where I felt like, the light got turned on, I'm way more open to sharing those with people. When they ask of like, oh, like, kind of, what was your path in this? I will immediately, I have no shame in being like, I do believe in like tarot mediums and all that, like these energy sources. And I will, and then, you can always tell if someone like gets a little turned off initially where it's like, okay, this isn't a conversation for you. Mm-hmm. But I think before it was almost, not that I felt like ashamed, but it was one of those like, I feel like there's this idea like, well, if you go to church like every week, then you're like this religious fanatic. Where it was like, oh, well, like you're going to be, you're like going to be like a virgin. You're going to be this, you're going to be that. You don't swear, you don't drink, you don't like have fun. You don't. And it was like, wait, what? I can tell you quite a few priests I know, they do quite a few of those things. And, they're considered like religious fanatics. And so I think it just comes from being comfortable, which maybe comes with age. Of like, I don't give a shit. I can talk about these things now. And not that I'm like preaching and trying to like convert anyone, but just talking from my own personal perspective and experience.
Absolutely. And when someone asks you, especially because like you said, you're not trying to convert anybody. You're not pushy. You're not pushing it on anybody. It's just, if somebody asks you, you're going to tell them how you feel and you're not ashamed. And
on the flip side of that, if my family, like when I first went to like this medium or when Brandon and I were first starting the tarot podcast, they were kind of like, oh, okay. I think now it's one of those, I'll say something and we won't get into an argument about it, even though they might be a little bit more on the like zealous side of some things. Just because again, it's like, you believe what you want to believe. We're all just trying to make it, right? Get through the days. So if that's what you need to do, and this is what I'm going to do, you do you, I'll do me.
Right. And you were saying before the show, actually, we were just having a quick chat. You had mentioned your siblings and how you guys see things differently. And so how did the paths go between how you see things now and how your sisters see things now, and especially your twin sister, because that's a very interesting even though sometimes you don't like talking about twin stuff, but
I know it's so interesting. Cause like I look at my older sisters and like my second oldest sister is like very, quote unquote old fashioned when it comes to religion. But she was never like that as like a teenager or early adult or anything like that. And I don't know, something just flipped where now it's like an example of the kind of perspective that she has is we were talking about the show Ted Lasso, and my mom had said something like, oh my God, I love Ted Lasso. Like I look up to that kind of, which Brandon, if you know my mom, and I don't know if you've seen Ted Lasso where you're like, really? Like, if you're saying this is the person you want to emulate, then let's look at the way you're acting. But anyway, I digress. But like my sister was like, you're coveting this person. Like you should only be looking to Jesus Christ to be able to. And so it was like one of those like, okay, well, this is a conversation I no longer want to participate in because it seems like it's getting a little crazy here.
Judgmental.
And just a little abrasive. Because like you have your beliefs. I don't think my mom's at home worshiping Ted Lasso, but at the same time,
sometimes she is, apparently. We talked about what worship is. It's just what you give your attention to.
So like, I think that, I don't know what happened to her. For my twin, I think that she very much wants a traditional, quote unquote, like lifestyle of like husband and dog and house and picket fence and this and that. And so like has subscribed to those societal norms. And I think that what comes along with that is this idea of like the upbringing she had with going to Catholic school. Like that was like, she's affluent and so she can pay for it. And so I think she like buys into that. My little sister is very much like a follower. And maybe that comes along with like, I'm a very strong personality. My twin is a very strong personality. And so she kind of had to like be a little bit more of a wallflower because there was already two really strong personalities. So she kind of just like goes along with what my parents think. And they've become like even more religious now. And so I think that honestly, what changed my perspective was moving to the total opposite side of the country. And I'm going to say that because whenever I say anything, like when I said like, oh, I went and talked to this medium, anytime I ever say anything along those lines or, oh, Brandon and I were talking about this, with the tarot and the symbolism of everything is always like, well, that's such a California thing. Like, what the fuck does that even mean? But I think there's this idea of like this like hippy dippy culture of like openness and this and that of out here versus I guess Connecticut where it's more rigid. I have no idea, but I think kind of being open to different perspectives and meeting different types of people out here and going to all these different communities definitely opened my eyes to a lot of things.
Yeah. And then when you said right now that is such a California thing, it just made me think that your parents were being, or family or whatever, were being judgmental about you having left, the nest and like, well, that is such a California thing of you to do because, well, you left. And I think that when I go back now, it almost seems like, oh, here's that crazy aunt that lives in like a commune. There's like that mentality of like, well, she does this and she's not subscribing to like, the lifestyle that all of them kind of adhere to. But they're so, it comes across as being so stuck in like a certain bubble that you don't see outside of it. Yeah. It's funny that you talked about your eldest sister and how she's become so religious and she wasn't always like that when she was young. Same thing with my eldest sister. So that's really bizarre. And I wonder now why that happens. It's so weird.
And does your eldest have kids? Yeah. And are they girls or boys or?
They're 3 girls and 2 of them, the extreme opposite, like the middle one is the one that's like, I don't care. Like I do my thing. She does her own thing. But the 2, like the eldest and the youngest are very much like in line with mom.
So my oldest sister has 2 girls. And part of me is like, is she like that because she has girls that she wants to like protect them and guard them and not subject them to things, right? The words like, I want to keep them as pure and juvenile, kind of innocent as possible. And the way I did that, or the way that it was like my influence was like this religious upbringing. So I want to do it. I don't know. I can't speak to that, but like, I think it's very interesting.
Right. And nothing wrong with like wanting to maintain, you know, your children in a sense of like, I suppose like just guard them from like terrible things in the world. Nothing wrong with that. But just, I think the rigidity of the, like, it's like this and it has to be like this is just a bit much for me.
Well, then you think about a pendulum, right? You swing so far on one side, as soon as they escape that, you know, look at kids when they go off to college and they were never had the opportunity to be exposed to like having alcohol or something. And then all of a sudden they're going to fucking hospitals because they have alcohol poisoning because they don't know how to fucking control themselves. Because like first time away, I can go fucking crazy. And it's like, you know, you have to think about those things. And I'm not in any way, shape or form saying like, give your kids alcohol, but I'm just saying that like, when you push them so far in one direction, you know, what's going to happen when they have the opportunity to go in that other direction.
Right. And Brandon and I have talked about this, and it's interesting because you know, my younger sister and I grew up in this, and we have 3 older siblings. But it's kind of like a big gap between the elder siblings and us too. And so we kind of grew up in that religious environment. And we did the same, like we went to college and but we didn't go so extreme, like you said, like we didn't go to the crazy extreme. Somehow we just had a modicum of like, I don't know, keep everything balanced in some way where, you know, yeah, we drank, but, you know, we didn't get, you know, shit faced, you know.
Right.
I mean, I would get drunk, but I wouldn't like, yeah, it wasn't like crazy.
You know what's so interesting? Now I'm going to go off here, but like obviously like I said, I have 4 sisters. My dad growing up, like I said, his family was very devout. He has 4 sisters. Is there something to that idea of this protecting the daughters to maintain this purity aspect of it, and, you know, not subject them to the like quote unquote dangers of the world that maybe traditionally like men could tolerate? That's a different topic, but I do think it's worth discussing at some point.
It's a valid point. It's because had they had all boys, what would that have been like?
Right. It'd be like, oh, you know, my one of my aunts has 2 boys that she adopted. And she always said to me, you know what? I have to care about 2 dicks. Theirs. If I had a girl, I'd have to care about all the dicks. And I was like, okay. And in my head, I'm like, how does that apply to my life? Like, I don't know why you're telling me this, but you know, like it's one of those types of situations. Like the boys will be boys. They can tolerate it. They're tough and strong. And like girls, we need to protect them and keep them pure. And again, that's such an archaic idea of this Virgin Mary, right, type of mentality.
Yeah. And I don't have children, so I don't know. And I'm assuming you don't either. So
no, I don't. And my dog
and Brandon doesn't either. So. Yeah.
So what do we know?
So here we are talking about things we don't know anything about.
Well, we were children though once, so we could speak from a little bit of experience. Yes. One thing I could say that popped into my mind when you're talking about raising women and daughters is, if there wasn't, or if the male in that was involved in the raising,
the man,
if he didn't take his responsibility to teach the world correctly to his daughters, maybe he just leaned on, because, you know, you got to work, you know, all the time and all this stuff, and you got to go out with your friends and whatever it is. So maybe they leaned on this control system of a religion, just like Santa Claus. Like kids will, or parents use Santa Claus as this way to control their children's behavior. They're like, all right, well, I have this set way to do it, so the Bible's going to tell them what to do, so I don't have to, you know.
Very good point.
But you know, Brandon, you'd have an interesting perspective because you only have brothers.
Exactly.
Yeah, and my parents didn't really go hardcore with their religion. It was more like, I'm the oldest, so we went to Catholic school, like you were saying, Ashley, what you did, we did too. But I think it was more of just to keep us out of the public school. And as we got older, my parents put my brothers into public school because private school is just getting way too expensive. So I was really exposed to religion through my uncle earlier, and my parents a little bit when they go to church, and my grandmother. And then my mom got into the born again Christian thing, but that again could have been another way to control things masculinely through order, you know?
Well, I mean, I think your mom and dad, you had boys. So like, I'm just thinking, like Ashley was saying, had you been girls, or had at least a couple of you been girls, or one of you, they would have been like, well, we'll keep, little Sally in private school, but we'll send the boys to public school.
Yep.
Or something, I think it would have affected their way of thinking about, how to protect the daughter or daughters.
Yeah, that's kind of why I was saying why I think they weren't as interested in religion themselves for us is probably because we were boys, and there was more of a different way to control us. It was more of like like spanking and stuff, and like discipline.
I don't know why I always laugh when you say spanking, but I think it's such a funny word.
Yeah, it is. So it's
spanking. I'm gonna spank you.
We're gonna put on some spanks, and you're gonna get spanked. Ugh. Yeah, it's really weird.
Oh my gosh, it's funny.
People are like, why is the world so crazy? And I'm like, what? Why? Did you pay attention growing up? That's why. Like,
yeah, it's funny actually that you had all sisters, and there were 5 of you.
Mm-hmm.
I have 4 siblings, so there's 5 of us, but only 1 brother, so mostly sisters. That's funny.
Yep. I find that when somebody has like, if there's a family that has like 2 boys, it's more likely they're going to have like more boys. I babysat for a family and there's 4 boys. And the last one, when I was there, when the mom was pregnant, like when she was like, we're going to find out if it's a boy or girl. And she so desperately really wanted a girl. And then it was a boy. And she's like, well, I'm happy the baby's healthy or whatever. But it's like one of those, like, I mean, yeah, but like you could tell she was like, oh man. But I just think it's so interesting. Like you kind of, for whatever reason, it seems like it's not like 3 boys and 3 girls, which would be a huge fucking family, or like 2 boys and 2 girls. It's always like, there's always the one-off, or it's just totally all one specific sex.
Unless you have like 12 of them,
Right.
Cause like my mom and dad came from big families, like, 10 or 11 siblings, I don't honestly even know, to be honest. I don't even know how much. I'd have to like go back and like count and find out how many there were. But yeah, but in those cases, I think it's more even.
Right.
It's
because you're flipping a coin, right? And so, in terms of like statistics.
12 times.
Exactly.
Oh,
this has been so fun. I'm so excited.
Yay.
Yay.
Yeah, this was a really great conversation. Do you have any other questions, Sharon?
Well, I know Ashley is kind of, I've got the feeling you don't like to answer twin questions, but I do.
Oh, no. It's just when people are like, can you feel what she's feeling? Like that question you get asked all the time. Like literally as soon as anyone finds out that you're a twin, that's all I want to know.
Okay.
Yep, but can you?
I won't. Yeah. But can you? But I really just want to know if you can. Can you?
We ask all the important questions here on the Overturn.
Yeah. So I guess I want to know at which point, well, okay, first of all, you're twins, you're identical, right?
We are, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, as far as like syncs and things like not that you could feel what each other's feeling, but that you might have had similar thoughts or like you would finish each other's sentences, that sort of thing. Did that sort of stuff happen when you were young?
It did, but think like, we're two physically different beings, but we had the exact same upbringing in terms of we lived in the same house, we went to the same school, we wore like the same clothes, and so we watched the same movies. So I feel like it's almost like when you have like a best friend that you do all that stuff with, where it just becomes a point where you do have like a shorthand and you can finish each other's sentences and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
And I think that it didn't like divulge into us being two separate individuals until she went away to medical school. And all of a sudden she had friends that had no knowledge whatsoever of me. Like she wasn't part of Alex and Ashley, the group. She was just Alex by herself. And then I got a job where I wasn't Alex and Ashley. I was just Ashley by myself. And then when they met, like when she would come home from medical school for breaks and like people from the museum I worked at met her, they were like, oh, like, that's so crazy. I never would have thought that you have this other person that like looks like you and acts like you, because they didn't know that,
How funny.
And I will also say that even though we did have obviously like very similar upbringings, I think psychologically there was a very big difference, because the reality is when you have two people that are doing the exact same thing, school, we were both swimmers, there is a unspoken and maybe even a lot of times unacknowledged competition that arises. So even though physically we were in the same situations, psychologically we had two very different perspectives in the way of looking at things. And so maybe that also influences how she raises her kids and the things she's doing, because she, has, I think, a lot of unresolved issues with me about those things.
Oh, very, very interesting. I mean, I don't really know other identical twins, so I don't know like how they go on with their lives. I mean, so I don't know if some of them stay like best friends, and like always together and always doing stuff together, or if, I mean, because it sounds a bit like a very unique case for you.
And I
like
think you think like everyone wants to have like their own identity. So like, I think a lot of times, especially like in high school and stuff, you'll see the case of like one is being this, going off in this realm, and then the other one's going into a totally different club because they want to be their own individuals. And, my high school was really small and we both had to swim. Like that's how we paid for college. We both got full swimming scholarships and we both swam the same events. And so they're really, there's only one swim team at a small school. I mean, there's one swim team at most schools, and we're swimming the same events, and then we're taking the same classes because there's a small course catalog because it's a small school. And so like, there is then that like competition of like, someone is always going to be better. Like that is just how it works. Someone's going to be better and someone's going to be worse. You're not going to always be tied, And so, like I said, I think that influenced a lot of the things that she says and does, even now, like where it's like, that was how long ago, let's move on with our lives. But, if she hasn't resolved it.
Okay. So she's gotten stuck with that. And do you feel like when you guys were going through those things that did you like the competition, or were you vying for that? Were you like trying to be in competition with her, or were you the one that's like, I wish we didn't have to do this?
But see, now Sharon, that's a loaded question, because number one, I'm incredibly competitive.
Okay.
Even now about everything in terms of if you can be competitive, but not with her. And I think because I was always the better one. So like, I never looked at it as like, I beat you. It was like, okay, well, the two of us need to beat everybody else. But that's a perspective of a winner. And I don't mean that in a mean way.
No, I get what you're talking about.
And so like, there was my freshman year of college, I got like really badly injured. And so like, she kind of had to carry the brunt of the pressure, because me, the one who was the one that was better, couldn't perform. And so like, she kept being like, when are you coming back? When are you coming back? And then when I was able to come back, she'd be like, okay, well, you're going to come in first. And then like, I'll come in second. And I'm like, you're already taking on that perspective of the loser. When the reality is like, we're going to the same practices. Genetically, we are 100% the same. Like the only difference is like in my mind, it was like, okay, I'll win. And so I did, you know?
Right. It's like the consciousness was different. It's like, to me, twins are just like,
and I think
mind-blowing.
That competition has rolled over into other aspects of like, well, who's going to get married first? Who's going to have a baby first? Well, then who's going to have a second baby? It's like, I didn't even have a first baby. So I don't even know. There's literally, and I would always say to her, like, I'm not competing with you. I don't care what you do. Get married before me. I didn't even really feel like I needed to get married, but at that point the ball had already been rolling. So like, it is what, but like in her mind, it was very much like, I constantly have to be like that one step ahead. And that still is how it feels like.
Oh,
where it's like, well, see, I've got this over you. I have this over you. It's like, if that makes you feel better, but like, no, in my mind, do you know, Chip, I never watched Mad Men, but there's apparently like the last scene of Mad Men where the little, like the son is something like I, you know, like, I don't forgive you or something, or whatever. And Don Draper's like, I don't even think about you. Like, that's honestly the perspective that I have of like, I don't even think about that. Like, it doesn't register in my mind. I don't care.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to know the dynamic from other twins if they feel similar.
Yeah. I got the feeling from you that is the answer you were going to give me. Just because you're the one of all five who has such an open-minded perspective on life, and everyone else seems to have stayed in their little tunnel vision. So I had a feeling, and it was very curious to me how twins could just be so different.
Sharon, where do you live?
Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, right. I will tell you right now, my twin sister lives in North Carolina, and I'm not trying to be like, you know, prejudiced against a certain area of the country, but like, you know, the mentality there is a different mentality than the California mentality in terms of how someone's life should look. Like, it's very much a traditional old-fashioned way of looking at things there. And so I think she puts herself in these, and before that, her residency was in Casper, Wyoming. You know what I'm saying? It's not like she's sitting there with like these open-minded, and not in any way, shape, or form am I trying to like pigeonhole Casper, Wyoming, but I went there and it was not like a bunch of like free thinkers and, you know, type of, you know what I mean? So she's putting herself in these places where it's like, well, then it is a competition of like getting all of those traditional norms of the house and the this and the that and the whatever. And like, I am not in that perspective or part of my life at all. And I don't think I'll ever be there.
Yeah. And that's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with like having some traditions and keeping some of those, because if you want them, but you know, staying closed-minded and thinking that keeping the traditions is what's keeping you saved, quote unquote, or whatever you think it means, that's closed-minded.
But see, that also feeds in, if we're going back to the quote from the beginning, that idea of like the keeping up with the Joneses type of mentality of like, well, as long as I get this, this, and this, then I'm going to be happy and I'm on the right path. And it's like, but who said that that's the right path for everybody?
Right.
If I look at the traditional story of you know, Jesus's birth, if we want to take this as verbatim, like Mary was a single mom who got fucking knocked up by God knows who, and then just married some guy just so she could be like, fuck, I need to have like a dad for this guy. And the guy's like, maybe he was like really old and he's like, nobody wants me, or like ugly or something. And like, it's like, well, I guess I'll just be with this woman, you know? And so that wasn't a traditional story in any way, shape, or form, or a traditional family.
Exactly.
And we look at that as like the savior of the world, you know?
Oh, but it was okay for them.
How dare you? That's hilarious.
My dogs are looking at me like, what is happening right now?
Peppers.
All right. Well, I think this might be a good place to end it. This is a pretty good episode length, I think. Even though we did do a 2.5-hour episode 2 episodes ago, so go check that out.
It was a bit much.
We were totally over Sharon, but yeah, I think I got in everything I wanted to find out about. And Sharon, you had some great questions and some great follow-ups. And Ashley, thank you so much for your time and sharing all that about yourself and oversharing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I hope I get asked back again.
Oh, yay, of course.
Oh, yeah. And this also, I want to tell people that we have a podcast, Ashley and I, if you're not familiar, we kind of told you about it. It's the Tarotbull Podcast. You can go to tarotbull.com, TAROTBULL.com, and check out everything. And it looks like we're going to start recording again. We've been talking about it. So look for that. And yeah.
And the fun part for your listeners is it might sound to you like I've got my shit together right now, but and if you listen to the Tarotbull Podcast, you will see those two opposite ends of that pendulum. Because I was going through some shit during the 2 years we were recording that, and so you'll kind of hear that.
Yeah,
but I love a divorce, moving.
Yeah,
cross country, then moving cross country. Get exactly again. Constant was always Gizzy, and you know, my ride or die. So it's a fun journey to watch a life spiraling out of control and then trying to get it back on track.
Yeah,
all through the eyes of the tarot.
Exactly. There's a lot of wisdom contained in those episodes. And I'd also like to give a shout out to our chat right now, because we listen to this every Thursday. We premiere it live, and Sharon and I always try to be in the chat to interact with people. And it's one of the favorite parts of our weeks we've already talked about, because we get to go in there and not only listen to ourselves say amazing things, but we get to have fun and
over
chat
again
with all our friends. So if you want to be part of that, join us every Thursday night. We do it on YouTube at the Brandon Bonanza channel. And is there anything else you wanted to add, Sharon?
I was going to say, sometimes I'm listening to Brandon for the first time, because sometimes I I space out when he's talking.
Thanks. No, I get it. Sometimes I space out when I'm talking, so it's fine. So what do we say to the fine people, Sharon?
That if you're not oversharing,
then you're totally not caring. All right.
That's right.
Take care, everybody. And
bye.